I mean, there's too many of us, in my view anyway, that are struggling to either A, put food on the table or make sure that the roof is there and it's going to stay there for a while. The Right Kind of Uncomfortable podcast is a platform that allows longer form discussions around issues that are sometimes sticky, uncomfortable, or perhaps simply areas we haven't taken the time to fully explore. We try to use this platform to teach, explain, and unpack sometimes avoided topics in a clear and concise manner, and leave it to the audience member to decide what to do with the information. Today we have CeCe Cox, CEO of the Resource Center in Dallas, Texas, an organization that provides support in a variety of ways for the LGBTQ community. CeCe allowed me to ask questions of all types, perhaps some that you may have had as well. Take a listen and tell me if you agree. All right, my name is James Pogue, President and CEO of JP Enterprises, and I'm here with our guest, CeCe Cox. And I want to throw the microphone to you, CeCe, to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about you, your background, and the Resource Center.
Hi, thanks, James. Good to be with you and your listeners today. I've lived in Dallas since 1984. I am a wife, a mother, a daughter, and I'm the CEO of Resource Center, which is a large LGBTQIA plus community center.
Gotcha. And before we get started too much, I know there's a lot of folks that can feel a little uncomfortable about asking the next question that I'm going to ask. So I would wonder if you would mind helping us out. How do you define for us LGBTQAI plus? What do all those letters mean, and help level set us if you don't mind?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And I should actually lay a little bit of foundation and get some background that Resource Center has been in the community for 40 years. And one of the things that we provide as a program and service is education and advocacy. And so the types of things we're talking about today, we actually have a team of folks that can be available to your listeners who go out to various corporations, nonprofits, all kinds of organizations like churches, synagogues, community groups, and visit with them about the LGBTQIA plus community and educate them and have conversations. So you could consider our conversation today just a starting point if people want more resources, and those could be found at myresourcecenter.org.
Perfect.
So to get to your question about the alphabet soup, L is lesbian, G is gay, B is bisexual, T is transgender, Q is queer, and in settings in which you might be dealing with youth, then it might be being used to indicate questioning, where someone is younger and they are exploring or unsure of their gender identity, so they're questioning. I is intersex, and A is asexual. So not all of those letters are equivalent in the categories that they represent. Lesbian and gay and bisexual are someone's sexual orientation, which is what every human being is either attracted to or not attracted to another human being for their primary social, emotional, love relationships. So a lesbian is attracted to another woman. Gay man is attracted to another person of the same sex, which is another man. Cisgender or heterosexual people also have a sexual orientation. A man is attracted to a woman's attracted to a man. So gay and lesbian refer to sexual orientation. Intersex, the I, is different. There are 1.7% of people in the United States who are intersex. And what happens is when we're born, if you're in a hospital, doctor slaps you on the hiney and says, hey, it's a boy or a girl. They assign a sex to a baby at birth. But an intersex person may have sex characteristics of both male and female. And they are a certain percentage of the population. Asexual are individuals who do not experience sexual attraction. Their nickname also, or another name that they go by, is ACE, A-C-E. So they have deep friendships with people. They may have boyfriends or girlfriends, but they do not experience sexual attraction. And queer can be a little complicated for folks because many of us grew up in an era in which queer was used as a word to bash LGBTQIA plus people. It was derogatory. It was used to out them. It was used in ways of hate. But many people in our community, including me, embrace the word queer. I identify as queer. And some young people are perfectly comfortable with it. It just depends on the person. So again, the most important thing to do with words is use the ones that people want to be used to exhibit their sexual orientation or their own gender identity.
And the plus?
Plus is an indicator that our language changes over time. So I came of age in the queer movement in the late 80s, early 90s, where I really started learning about my own sexual orientation as a lesbian. I started getting involved in organizations. And back then, we just often used to say the gay community. That's all we said. But that's not fully inclusive. It didn't outwardly state transgender. It didn't outwardly state lesbian. It didn't include everybody, and it felt exclusive. Not a wide enough umbrella. And so the plus is an indicator that our awareness and our openness and our language, as the English language, continues to change. And so there may be other words that become added in over time, and also exhibits a willingness to understand that there are a lot of people under this queer umbrella.
And so if Mark is talking to Matthew, and Matthew says, "Hey, I identify as queer. I'm comfortable with that," then calling that person queer, it's okay. However, calling everyone queer may not be okay, because they may not feel like, "Hey, that I feel that differently than Matthew does. Matthew's okay with it, but not me." So, is it fair to say, like, having that conversation, right, with one, like, how are you, where are you, and it's some of that's going to be clumsy and awkward, and it's going to feel a little strange and permission asking. Is that a fair assessment of how? I mean, that's how it might operate.
That's totally fair. And the key to what you said, I think, is, we're in a society where we want to shoot off a text or an email or not really have a face-to-face conversation with somebody. But we're talking about human beings, and we're talking about learning about one another and learning how to better understand our fellow human beings. So it's perfectly okay to ask these questions to someone, ask what words they want to be used to best describe them and best see them as a human being.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of conversations that are happening around with folks, and I believe that we become better people, better colleagues, better teammates, better friends, better family members if we have deeper connections with one another. And the pathway towards those deeper conversations can be, tell me about you, right? And I think that we don't do that as much as we could. It's like fast food conversations, so to speak, right? Like drive-through relationships, and I don't really know who the person is I'm talking about. I barely know your name first and last.
That's right. We're a little afraid to go deeper sometimes because so many conversations are hyper-politicized or so widely criticized due to our social media culture. But we really got to be able to be willing to learn and to open up our hearts. And part of that learning is to operate in a space that feels safe, which is why it's so important that companies, corporations, all kinds of workplaces learn about these issues and create spaces where it's okay to have conversations, interact with one another.
That's fantastic. And as you're thinking about the work that you do, where are your areas of current sort of hyper focus? The areas where you're spending the most time and the most energy because fill in the blank.
Well, my main project for a while now, and will continue for a bit, is the fact that Resource Center is building 84 units of affordable housing that is affirming for LGBTQIA plus individuals. It's a half mile from our main headquarters, and it'll be open for occupation in July 2024. So we're not very far away, just about a year away. But we have broken ground. Construction is well underway. It's been a project that has taken quite a while to get together and to get it financed. It's a $31 million project. And we have amazing development partners, Matthews Southwest and Volunteers of America. So we're very excited to help contribute to affordable housing in Dallas and also to meet the specialized needs of the aging LGBTQIA plus community. I'm not sure if I mentioned it's for people who are seniors, so age 55 and above.
Wow.
But that's taking most of my focus right now.
I think that sometimes when we have these conversations, we're talking about a slice of the big diversity pie, if you will. We can forget or get too over here on one corner, forget that we're more than just one thing, right? So a person can be a part of the LGBTQIA plus or perhaps queer community, and they're also 55 plus. They're also, and the socioeconomics come into play. I mean, there's too many of us, in my view anyway, that are struggling to either A, put food on the table or make sure that the roof is there and it's going to stay there for a while.
That's exactly right. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because the issue of intersectionality is key. And I think sometimes that, like any community, there can be views of the queer community that make us very one-dimensional. But we're probably one of the most diverse communities by any definition, because we are Black, we are brown, we are Indigenous, we are Asian Pacific Islanders, we are women, we are men, we are young, we are old, we're all across the economic stratosphere. So there's not just one way or one type of LGBTQIA plus person, but we are in all communities.
Yes. And so as you're thinking about the work that your organization does with leaders, with companies, nonprofits, et cetera, imagine if you're talking to executive leaders, C-suite folks, board members, how do you think they should be showing up in today's moments, right? And what's the difference between good versus great leadership in these spaces?
I've been thinking about this, and I think you've got to have awareness. You have to have even more than that. You need to have familiarity, and you need to have commitment. So let me give a little context around what I would mean by those words. So awareness is having some understanding, like how we just talked about, what's the definition of LGBTQIA+? What does it all stand for? What is it? That should be a bare minimum. You're going to be doing IDEA work about or within this community. And then familiarity. You can't just read about it. You can't just talk to one person that you happen to know as a lesbian or a gay person. Are you showing up if your company has an ERG group that is a Pride ERG group or one that is for your queer employees? Do you have some familiarity with people in your workspace? Do you go to those events? Do you know their leadership? Do you know the challenges that they're facing? And then commitment. A company or a leader at a company shows true commitment by how they show up. And so are your policies in place? But way beyond just policies that don't discriminate against LGBTQIA plus people, there has to be a work culture that supports them and creates a safe environment. So awareness, familiarity, commitment.
When you think about, so this familiarity part, it seems like, I like how you framed it, that it's the step 2 or 3 beyond, I know the definitions, right? I know some of the humans. I know the humans and what positions they're in. I know the challenges, but I would also guess, like, what are your numbers, right? The successes, and who's been promoted, and who we transitioned to other work outside of our organization is doing really well. What are some of the stories that are there? And I think that makes a lot of sense. The awareness, the familiarity, and then that commitment. When you and I met at a recent roundtable sponsored by North Texas Commission, I asked a question from the audience that I was so grateful that you received with grace and responded. I've been asked this question a few times, and I didn't feel like I had a great answer. I feel like my answer was only good. And I said, oh, you know what? There's this lady. She looks smart and with it. Let me ask and see if she will help me. And so thank you for that then. And I want to re-ask the question now for the folks that might be listening. How do you respond when folks say that the LGBTQIA plus community is getting the lion's share of attention in sort of the inclusion space right now, and that other groups aren't necessarily getting the spotlight they feel that they need, that they want, that's necessary to continue the progress that they've been having? How much you respond to that?
Well, I do remember that question. I immediately answered, I thought for a minute, but then I encouraged people to not get distracted. Our lives have become very politicized all across the country, not just in the state of Texas. And I assume your listeners are in many different places. But this also ties back to something that I just said earlier. What does it look like for leaders to show up right now that's great? Awareness. I think it's really important to be aware that there may be a high amount of attention focused right now on the LGBTQIA plus community within a workplace, but they are part of the workplace, and they are walking through a world that is not safe. It's not welcoming. Our bodies, our lives are being criminalized again. So for instance, let me get real specific. In colleges and universities in Texas, there was a law, a bill that was going to say you cannot teach critical race theory. Well, again, we live intersectional lives. So you have folks that are queer and Black. So they're made invisible by a law like that. A law got passed that said transgender athletes in college cannot compete in the gender in which they identify. So if you have a transgender woman that wants to run on the track team, you can't do that anymore. Well, I have a kid. I know how much he benefited from being able to enjoy sports and learn leadership and camaraderie. If I had a transgender child, they wouldn't be able to play sports in college anymore. So there's real fear out there. Also, Texas is a state that doesn't have employment protections for LGBTQIA plus individuals. There's also no federal employment protection other than that have come through some court cases, but not a piece of legislation. What that means is you might work at a company that has awesome policies and a great culture, and the LGBTQIA plus folks there feel really good. But that's not every single company. Contrast, there could be a person who works at a company who has a boss who is just not informed, aware, who really cares, compassionate, understands the importance of IDEA. And if that boss gets a queer person in the crosshairs and just decides to fire him because the boss doesn't like that person, boss can do that. No ramifications. We have no legal recourse for that because Texas does not have employment protections that include LGBTQIA plus people. There's consequences for firing someone. There's protections based upon race, sex, gender, ethnicity, all of those things, but not LGBTQIA plus status. So we are walking around in a legal context that doesn't protect us. A lot of things to be fearful of because of the bills that were passed or things that are threatened to be passed. And we want to feel safe, welcome, and included at a workplace. So these matters in the workplace are really important. And there are a number of studies that have been done, but I have some stats from a LinkedIn and YouGov survey that shows that 49% of LGBTQ professionals say they will not work at a company that does not include LGBTQ-friendly benefits. So when you're looking at hiring from a attraction, retention, satisfaction standpoint, you've got to be competitive. The workplace is more competitive now than ever. Everybody's having trouble hiring, shortage of workers. And if you don't have policies that are inclusive of the queer community, then according to this survey, automatically you're cutting out half of the queer people that might apply for a job, and thereby you're just reducing the entire pool of people that you could attract. That's just one example. I talked to somebody one day who came into our building for a meeting of employee resource groups that were LGBTQ groups, and he told me he was so thankful to be in his employee resource group at his place of employment. It was one that welcomed him as a gay man because he said he was not welcomed by his own family. They had rejected him as a gay man, and he didn't feel safe in many places of worship. The work was the one place that he actually felt safe and embraced. That's going to be an employee who's going to be loyal to that company. They're being treated right. They're being seen. They're respected. And that's why these things matter.
It sounds like that even in the midst of some of these points of turmoil, that there are bright lights and that there is some good news. And I wonder, what's the outlook? You know, is there a path towards more instead of just having points of bright lights, is there something more out there, that there's a sunrise that's happening that you feel optimistic about?
I think there absolutely is. I mean, I've been involved in this community for a long time, and there were just a very few corporations who had policies in place that stated they did not discriminate against their employees who were gay or lesbian. That's the terminology at the beginning. It's now become more inclusive, as we started out talking about. And now there are more and more and more, hundreds and hundreds. Not all, there's a long way to go, but it used to literally be just a handful. And LGBTQIA plus employees were afraid to come out of the closet. Many of them still are, and they are spending a lot of energy hiding at work, which is not a good use of an employee's time or energy. But many of them are out and open and contributing in ways that their companies appreciate. And so as those stories grow, as those numbers go up, I definitely have seen progress and expect that it will continue that way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, CeCe. This is great. I feel smarter. I hope the listeners feel smarter as a result, and they can use this as some form of resource, one not simply for the awareness, the definitions, but how to move from that towards familiarity and then drive towards commitment, whether you happen to be a positional leader in your organization or otherwise, leading an ERG, a teammate, a colleague of someone, that we can lead each other towards a more inclusive space. So I really appreciate you taking time to make us all a little smarter.
Thank you, James. It's been my pleasure. And for your listeners, remind you again, we are in Dallas, Texas. We do have a generic name, but we're in Dallas. Our name is Resource Center, and listeners could go to myresourcecenter.org and find us.
Thank you so much.